If you were a doctor, or not even, it doesn't really matter, but especially if you're a doctor, please, I'm begging you to consider the order you give somebody information. Because the first time I gave blood, the hospital repaid my generosity by scaring the living shit out of me. So I give blood at the children's hospital because I just assume my adult blood goes further that way. And the first time I gave blood there, I got a phone call a few days later that said, hey, so the good news is we used a unit of your blood on a kid. We gave it to a kid. And I was like, great, that's what I'm here for. And they were like, the bad news is he had a terrible reaction to it, which is already a weird way to tell me that story. That there's no good news in that good news, bad news. That really was bait and switch news. But I'm like, well, I'm terribly sorry. He didn't like my blood. And then the lady goes, well, the kind of reaction he had, one of the causes of that is if the person who donated the blood has HIV. So we want you to come in and do a test. Skip to the end, I don't have it. But what a wild way to pass all that information along. To start with, good news, we gave some to a kid. Okay. But also, what? Also, I didn't know they waited until something went wrong to test it. I assumed that they just took some extra on the side, like when you get a milkshake, they give you that little tin can sidecar of extra milkshake. Take a little extra milkshake, run it through the machine, I don't know, before you give it to kid. So then I remember she said this was only one of the possibilities, so I said, what are the other things that could cause this? And she said, well, it can happen if the donor is a woman and they were recently pregnant, which does not apply to me. But then she says, we gave him 2 units of blood, one from you and one from a 37-year-old woman with 2 kids. So doesn't that one seem like the more likely thing, that you would also lead with that information? You just pair up those 2 things, where one is like kind of nice and not a big deal, and the other one is terrifying. Like a fortune teller who's like, look, either one of 2 things is going to happen. Either you're going to get hit by a train tomorrow, or your sister is going to see a dog. Look, obviously I'm fine, and the other person just happened to have been pregnant at some point. But I just think there should be something from now on. There should be a place in the file, on my file, where you can click it, and it's like, he's a bit of a worrier, you know? He thinks every bump is the worst case scenario. For him, at least, we're going to do the test before we tell him the possibilities.